Matthew Milioni. My wife is Erica. We have 12. How many are at home still? I think we have I think we have 5 or 6 in that are schooling now.
Stephen Buxton. My wife is Kristen. We have 8, and we have probably 6. Yeah, 6 schooling right now.
My name is Jamin Turner, and we live in East Boston. And we have 5 children, but one of them is still on the way, imminently to come. Megan's due the end of January here. So there's 3 children that are in school.
So we have a list of questions that we'll go over, and maybe we'll just, do you guys have them? Do you want to pull them? Maybe we'll just take turns reading one of them off at a time. Do you have them, Jamin?
Yeah, I can pull it up.
So we'll just we'll take turns reading them off. I think by way of introduction, this is a neat format to ask questions and just kind of like get some feedback, some insight, some suggestions. The caveat always for me is that every homeschool is an individual homeschool. Like, it's kind of like marriage advice, like some things that work in one home would not work in another, and vice versa. And so I'll answer these questions to the best of my ability, like putting myself into the situation, how it would work and function in my home. But you have to internalize all that and figure out what it would mean for your home to apply some of these things. So why don't we start off? The first question we have is, how do you understand the role of a father in a homeschooling family? Maybe as we read these, offer any suggestions you have, and then we'll just kind of open it up, and anybody else can share for that one too. So the role of a father in homeschool, I think that, so I've known some families over the years that have organized their whole world for father to be involved actively daily in homeschool, and that's great. It's neat. It's a neat thing to do. It has a lot of good fruit. That's I think probably 90% of homeschool families, mom is doing most of the education. The role of the father is, I think, at least in my home, is support, encouragement, and provision. Like, so when discipline issues are becoming difficult, we need to step in. I need to step into those places. But there's also some of the stuff that I talked about last night, kind of like the more visionary aspects of homeschool, like when you're out and about, when you planning trips or traveling around town, and using those opportunities that we have with the children to point out things, to talk about history, to talk about spiritual principles, to use our time with the family for educational purposes is a big part of homeschool. And then, of course, whatever support our wives need as they work, whether that's resources, materials, space. And I think the other piece that's important to recognize I always say to people kind of jokingly, my wife is the teacher and I'm the principal, and like it functions that way. Like the discipline problems, the administrative stuff, things that need to get done, fall to me. But there's another huge aspect to being a father of a homeschool family in providing the support and rest for your wife. That recognizing the work and the toil that she puts in and trying to make some space for her that isn't child focused, whether however that works in your particular home, but recognizing that these women do a lot for our children, and they need some support and appreciation and rest and time to themselves and all those things.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that I find myself being like a sounding board for my wife. When she when she's trying to figure out a particular situation with a child or something changing in our curriculum or a direction to go, just being a resource to be there to help figure those things out. And also, I guess, as a role in our homeschool as the spiritual leader of the home, when it pertains to like our studies, biblical studies and things like that, I'm involved with guiding and determining what particular areas we're going to be concentrating on. Sometimes the curriculum comes with something, but then we'll take a look at that and say, well, where are we at as a family? Is this going to fit our needs as a family right now? Or is there something that we're going to do differently and kind of matching that together? But yeah, it's kind of for me, support, like you said, is a huge thing. But making a lot of those decisions, because I know we have our core curriculum, but as you go through the years, what is best for your family is a lot of decision making, and so making sure that you're available for that. But I don't know what else I can answer beyond what you said on that. That's, yes, just the support system, because she does a lot of those, and I'll leave that for the next question. So yeah.
How about you, Jamin? What's your role in the homeschool family?
I just thought of one other phrase. I think it was maybe Eisenhower that had this plaque on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." And that's kind of what I think of, is like taking the overall responsibility for it. Like if something's going wrong, taking that as my responsibility as the father and leader. I like the principal term. I'm the principal of Princeton Academy. We live on Princeton Street, so that's the name of our school. But I like that model.
You want to read the second question?
Yes. Yeah, second question is, how do you and your spouse divide educational responsibilities? Mine is probably going to look a little bit differently. That's a very good question, by the way. Both my wife and I, we have strengths and then we have weaknesses. So we kind of divide those up. I am horrible when it comes to reading, writing, English, anything like that. As the other breakout sessions going on, I am dyslexic. So when it comes to homeschooling, that is one place that I do not do a very good job with my children. And so my wife takes primary responsibility with that. However, I'm stronger in math. And so although I'm not always there for the math portions, and she usually kind of orchestrates all that, I come in afterwards sometimes when some of the children are having difficulties, and I sit down and I kind of work with them with those particular subjects and other things that I'm stronger in. But also with my occupation where I used to work, I used to be at the fire department. So I worked 24 hours and I was off 48 hours. And so my schedule afforded me the opportunity to be at home more during the day as we were homeschooling. And so that'll probably be something else that comes up in these questions about dividing things with working. It's just been a little bit different for me. So I was home a lot more, and so we were able to take that. So if we had several children trying to learn how to read, and some of them just needed to have time practicing reading to somebody or something like that, then I could step in and take that time and help my wife, so that way she could focus on other children and other responsibilities that she had at that time. So that for me is a little bit of how we divide some of those responsibilities for the subjects in the home. In regards to, say, like Matthew was talking yesterday and a little bit today about taking opportunities for homeschooling, that's one of the things I love about homeschooling is everything can be an opportunity, whether that's going out your washer breaks or whatever it is, taking those opportunities to bring the children along and work with them as you're working and allow them to fiddle with things and just work alongside of you. And so that would be one of my responsibilities, is just including them, or like Matthew said, even taking them to the store. If your wife or you as a mother are going to the store and just doing those things, we don't sometimes think about how important it is to be able to go to a store and to pick things up and to learn how to buy things that we need and things. But these are all essential things to teach children as they're growing up.
How do you guys divide?
Well, there's a gap between like where I want to be and where we are. So I think ideally, one thing just in particular is I wish that I think that it's good if dad understands the curriculum and like helps to make that decision in particular. Because that's kind of like a top level administrative thing. And that also takes like understanding of each child and their needs too. So I think I haven't done great at this, but I think it's important for dad to, particularly in selecting curriculum, setting that direction. I think that would be a role that I would idealize being better in. Megan does 97% of the teaching, probably. And I also idealize doing more of that, probably especially as children get older. The boys asked me why men teach older children the other day, and I have some ideas about that. But that's what's interesting to me, at least, is like older grades more. So I idealize taking more teaching on at that point.
I would say in our homeschool, we have focused a lot on self-directed learning. So in the early years, we focus a lot on good reading comprehension and skills. And once they read well, we put them into self-directed learning. Because of that, we have a lot of need for accountability, because they're doing they have their schedule and they go through their day. And so what's been helpful for our homeschool is for me to do the accountability check on that stuff when I come home, when we have supper, is like, okay, did you do what you're supposed to do? Did you do what you're supposed to do? The other thing that's happened for us is that I have, kind of like you guys, I have a natural affinity for history and theology, and I probably am more on the lower. We don't go very far with science, but unless the child does it on their own studies. But for what science we do, those are more my domains, and a lot of that, especially with history and theology, is more either we do a book study or it's conversations that we have, or we read a book together as a family, or it comes up in conversations, and that's where those two subjects especially get talked about a lot, and those are kind of fall to me to do. Do you want to read that third question, Jamin?
Are we going to do like a live Q&A? Are we going to do that at the end? Okay. All right. With work and other responsibilities, how do you stay meaningfully involved? I think I talked a little bit about that, like in curriculum at least like a minimum, but this is a big challenge for me. Kind of the everyday. My work is just a regular like wage earning job. I'm not a fireman.
Neither am I.
Or a handyman. Okay. Yeah. I took on some like grading at one point, which is kind of what you're talking about, accountability, but I maybe needed some accountability because it was hard for me to stay on top of. So I have some growing to do probably in this area.
I think the with the question is with work and being busy, I think that taking an interest is the most important part. I think you really have to do it well, and especially I think if you have a medium or large size family, you really have to kind of adopt the attitude and disposition of a homeschooler. You really have to own the identity of I am the educator of my children. And I don't have any problem. It works well to outsource that teaching to my wife. She's there during the day. She does all that stuff. But there is an ethos of homeschool that like that feeling of responsibility that I have a heart and a mind to think about my children's education. And I would say, I don't know if this will come up later. If it does, I'll refer back to this. But there's also what comes along with that is a sense of practical education. I don't think that all children are destined to be academics. I think all children need to know how to read, and they all need to have good math skills, but they're not all going to go to college. They're not all going to be in the sciences. Like those are specialty fields that some people go into. And I have some brilliant children academically, but they're not all. And so there's a whole nother domain of education for people who aren't going to go into academics, like business finance. Like, how do you make business decisions? I run a small family business. My boys start working with me about the time they're age 15. And so using what information and access you have as a father and making your children a part of that world. So if I run a small business and my boys, okay, so maybe I put my daughter through a QuickBooks course at 13, and she does a 6-week course on QuickBooks, and then she can start looking in and helping with some of that work around the home. The boys, you start doing projects around the house, and you talk about tools and how tool safety and job safety and how you. It's great, especially if you have a child who's not interested in like math, for instance. The classic, like, why do I have to learn all this stuff? Take them outside and do a 3, 4, 5 triangle on a framing. Like, show them how important these skills are in everyday life to be able to give them some kind of like motivation for what they're doing. So all of that, I like wherever we can. So you're a 9 to 5, but you're also an engineer. And so you have a lot of skill base to point those things out to your children. The fireman has the extra time at home. Like, there's something in each of our lives that we can incorporate that bring the rest of our family into our world so that they can benefit from the things that we particularly do.
Yeah, thank you. Stay meaningfully involved. Intentionality, making sure, like anything that's important to us, we will make time to do. And so each and every one of us is here today. We're making time to do this because we feel like our children are important. And so I find making sure, like even I have a group that I'm involved with for my own accountability, and one of my check boxes is I made a habit or a goal for myself that because I have 8 children, each and every day I kind of make sure that I'm engaging that one particular child. And so I kind of rotate that around, make sure, kind of like we learned yesterday about those temperaments, and some of them that can kind of fall to the back and you don't want to leave them behind. But it's kind of the same thing here with the responsibilities with homeschool. You were talking about around the table and coming home after work and being intentional about following up on are you accountable? Are you doing your readings? Maybe even asking those questions. Well, in that reading that you did today, what did you learn? And then you're engaging with your child at the same time and connecting with them and doing your accountability with them at the same time is some of the things that I do there. But one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening yesterday, and in particular listening to Brother Finney's talk, enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether that's your evangelism or in your homeschool, if you're enthusiastic about math and science and all these different things, then, like you said, if you are finding those things important, then it's going to engage them and it's going to create those connections and make it meaningful. So taking that time, even when you come home from work, to just be enthusiastic about what they're doing is really going to help.
Yeah, amen. This is a great question. What subjects or skills do you feel especially called to pass on as a father? That's a great question. I think that character is the most important. Whether my children are artists or mechanics or scientists or whatever they do in their future, I care very little about that. I want them to do it well. I want them to enjoy their life. I want them to have skills that are they can meaningfully employ for the rest of their life. But I recognize that there's a wide variability between all my children, and they're all going to go in different directions. Whichever direction they go, I want them to go with character. I want them to be honest people of integrity. And I want them to be spiritual people. I want them to love the faith and love the Lord. And so those are the two most important skills. And I'll say this, I think that there's tons of academic advantages for being a homeschool family, but that's not why I homeschool. I homeschool because of those character issues. I homeschool because I want to shape and develop the character of my children. I want to know what kind of people they're being formed into, and I want to be directly responsible for those things. That's the reason that I homeschool. There's a lot of side benefits in time, in flexibility, in academic performance. There's a lot of those side benefits, but those are all secondary to me.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I'm actually kind of jealous you got to go first on that one. Yeah, I was thinking integrity, that people can take you for your word. Your yes is yes and your no is no. I was trying to think of something else. Like, I was also thinking about this during the presentations yesterday. One of the things that I say in my household is we have excluded the word can't. I was thinking about Brother Finney's talk yesterday about how when you come up against a problem, they always want to say, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Well, as one benefit that I can say that I gleaned from the fire department, because you are dealing with problems all the time, and sometimes when you don't know the answer, who do they call? So you have to be a problem solver. And so that's one thing I would like to pass on to my children is, I don't know if I can teach that you will always be joyful with whatever you're learning or whatever that problem is, but that you never say can't, that you press into it and you figure out a direction through it. And I think that's important because every single one of us is going to come up against some sort of problem in our life. And so are we going to just throw in the towel and give up, or are you going to find a way to solve that problem? And so I want to instill that in my children to continue to press into that and to find a way.
I think along that line too is like the continual learner. Matthew, you talked about self-directed. That almost feels like reading and then a desire to learn. That feels like basically the whole package, because once you can read and self-direct, then you can continue on learning. I thought just one other thing. I think like 1,000 years ago, this would have been a lot different conversation, of course. But because in that time, like a father had a trade or something, and like the children, like that's what they would learn. Those are the things that they would get. And so I think that's worth at least exposing your children to the skill set or trade or like knowledge base that you have. They don't have to do that. Our world is a lot different. They're not as locked in as maybe people were in the past. But I think it's worth at least, if I make cabinets, that my children would have exposure to that, have some level of skill in that.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's another important rationale for homeschool. As a graduate of the public education system, just a high school, I recognize when I have my own family that if I look back about what I learned from my time in public school, 90% of it was things that I read in books because I was interested in it. I don't remember the stuff I learned in classes. I don't remember the formulas, but the things that I did remember were things that I was interested in and that I read books about. And I was like, if you just put in a child a love of reading, they can go anywhere and you can turn the love of reading into anything, any skill set, any direction. You can pursue the sciences, you can pursue art, you can pursue mathematics, you can pursue chess, you can pursue anything if you're interested, if you can find the resource and love to read.
Yeah, I don't mean to continue on with that, but I think I had some conversations yesterday with some folks that they're getting ready to start down this road of homeschooling. And so, as many of us are, like I can remember when we were starting to go down that route, it can be a little bit intimidating, but somebody just said, if you just teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and you get that desire in them for learning, lifelong learning, then your histories, your science, all that stuff, they'll take off in it. And so don't get discouraged. Question 5 is, who teaches the Bible in your home? That's another very good question. I teach the Bible in our home as the main spiritual leader in our home. However, when I'm not at home, that's not when the Bible stops being taught in my home. So my wife also teaches Bible to my children in the home. Our curriculum has a biblical section in it, but like I mentioned earlier, we may use both of them, or we may decide on something that we want to do on our own. But ultimately, I have the responsibility of making sure that biblical teachings are happening in my home, but my wife comes alongside me and helps in teaching that in my absence. And then as we come together in the evenings, then it falls back on me when I'm in the home to continue with those teachings for my wife and for myself. And then it's my responsibility to engage with other people, because that's one of the things I was even talking about yesterday as well. I found myself in a place one time where, yeah, it was good. I was teaching everyone else, but then I looked around and I was like, well, who's teaching me? So it's good to also realize that you need to be engaged and also gathering from your communities and from your fellow brothers as well.
There's something too, like a difference I see in this question is we think of teaching Bible, like that's definitely parents, the dad's responsibility is like this spiritual leader of the home. But that's kind of one path that's integrated in life, family devotions, those types of things. But then there's another piece of like specific Bible curriculum, like an actual class. I'm interested, I'm going to consider myself a learner as early in this. I'm interested, Matthew, what you've done. Do you have like a specific curriculum that you teach Bible, or is it more like the interwoven life character teaching?
We would do that more through our family devotions. I think it's very worth the idea of going through a specific set. The problem, the difficulty is this. If you think of your family devotions as a time, so in answer to the question, like we do Bible memory during homeschool during the day, but I do Bible teaching at night with the family. The problem is, if you have a large range of children ages, you have to aim one direction or the other. We do a lot of like Bible story stuff with the little kids for bedtime and things. And then our Bible teaching as a family is more topical, like something that we're addressing or thinking about or going through a book of the Bible or something like that. That's how our Bible teaching works. Theology, though, I'll say this, those conversations that we have in our time discussing the Bible as a family are they're pretty interactive. So we do a lot of questions and like, what about this? And where does the Bible say that? And why do we believe this? So that happens a lot in that format for our family. And what I've seen is that setting that up so that it's a good, conducive environment has made pretty theologically interested and sophisticated children. Like that way of thinking about the scriptures as the source of information and wanting to know what it says about X, Y, or Z, I think is the kind of bedrock of theological thinking. Like, I want to know what the scriptures teach about this issue that I see in the world. Like, that's the thing, that's like the spiritual version of reading, you know? It's like wanting to know wanting to apply the scriptures to these real world situations. And so we can provoke that through our Bible teaching and through talking about making the scriptures a centerpiece of how those conversations run in our homes. But I haven't done till some of my children have come to Sattler, I don't know that they haven't done any specific theology courses. But I think they've done okay once they've got there. Finney would know.
That's right. That's right.
Am I up here to read the next question?
Yeah.
You ready for that?
Yeah.
Is on-the-job training for your sons a part of your homeschooling, that is apprenticing? No, for me, it's not. I'm an engineering manager, and so we don't do any type of that on-the-job training. They like to come to work with me. It's interesting to walk around, but I don't have not doing any apprenticing in that sense.
I'm probably the only one here that does, but I have my own business, and it's specifically with my sons. My daughters haven't worked in my business except for some of the bookkeeping and stuff. About the age of 15, my sons start working with me, but we also tend to finish high school about 16, maybe 17. But we use the high set as our high school completion, and so usually our children are done with that by 16 or 17, and so they work with me and finish that last year. The boys do, and that's been really good. I feel like, you know, my oldest son just married and he's working now, but he plans to finish a degree, and I don't know. I mean, I kind of hope that he doesn't end up in the blue collar world. I think he's a really smart kid, and it would be good for him to be in some kind of professional skill. So I'd love to see him move in a different direction. I also think that for the rest of his life, he'll be glad for that blue collar background, like to know how to work on his house, to know how to fix things himself, to know how to do things in his home will be helpful no matter which direction he goes. And then, of course, the boys that are probably more likely to stay in trades, that experience, so Elisha's 20 now. He's been working with me for 5 years. He's 20 years old and he has 5 years work experience. Like, it's great. Like, he's 20 and he can be a foreman for my crews. Like, I could put a whole crew with him. He works really well. He's got a lot of trade skills already. So there's a lot of opportunity for those of us in the trades to use our sons that way. I'll say this too, my boys grow beards early, which is helpful because here in New England, people are really touchy about young people on job sites. And we do everything by the book. We have work permits for them. Our insurance is in order. They don't use power tools until they're a certain age. So we do everything by the book, but it's still the case here in New England that people are very, very touchy about having young people on job sites. So it's just something about that world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's not much on the job training for firefighting. However, my children, they learned CPR and we have some devices that my wife and I, as we started, when they were in the home, some of our older children, like we have some devices if the children start choking and things like that. So I've done some airway management, and I have taught my children how to breach a wall if they cannot get to the stairwell and get outside, but it's more preferable if they just go out the door. So there's been some interesting things that we have done, but that is one caveat. I know it's kind of off topic here, but that's one thing that I notice for homeschooling that the public schools probably do a little bit better is fire safety in homes, because when we homeschool, we don't ever teach that subject. And so yeah, it's something that you might want to think about, or talk to your local fire department, or come see me and we can lay something out for you or whatever. But yeah, even now, like with CPR, it's not very difficult. They have a hands-only CPR, so you can teach all the children to do these things. But yeah, as for job stuff, I like to take them with me when I'm doing things just around the house myself, and try to give them some of those trade-ish type things or whatever. A lot of times we're both fumbling through it at the same time, because I have no clue what I'm doing sometimes too. But that's the best learning environment, I think, is trial and error, and like you said yesterday, failures.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can learn the most from failures, and so it's good to bring them along in those things. But yeah, as for job training, they weren't out there pulling hose or packaging victims or anything like that, or extricating people out of vehicles for me. So yeah.
If we're going to do Q&A, we're a little bit short on
Speed up.
time.
Okay.
I think that these questions of a difficult child and a wife facing burnout, what do you do in those scenarios? I'm going to combine those questions. I think that's a good place to address before we move on. The attitude of the principal, like that the discipline problems are my problem, like that's where my responsibility lies, I think is a really important issue with a child who's having difficulty, whether that's attention or obedience or whatever the case is. Obviously, whatever that issue is going to have its own custom tailored solution. But I think a big problem that I've seen over the years with homeschools who have faced a lot of difficulty is that when that difficult child keeps having the same problem, and it's kind of left for mom to sort out, like, well, you're there, you got to figure it out, and off to work I go, you're setting everybody up for failure. Like if something's not working, if something wasn't working in my homeschool, I'm going to figure it out. So if there's a child that just won't learn or just won't listen, if we got to take a day off or two and sit by the side of the table and work that out, we're going to work it out. Like, you have to take responsibility for that issue and make it so that your homeschool can function. I know that there's a million different scenarios that people could be in that would make that hard, but it has to be the responsibility of the father to make sure that the homeschool can function, that there's enough order in the home. And those issues need to make it to the family table. They need to make it to the family training. They need to make it to our Bible time. They need to become holistically addressed by the whole family. We need to change our focus and say, we need to focus on obedience. We need to focus on not complaining. We need to focus on follow through. Whatever the issue is that's not getting done, we have to make that an intentional focus that becomes what we're working on as a family until it's better. And then we move on to the next thing. When your wife is burned out and this is a very common scenario. It is a grueling task to be a teacher and a mother. I think similarly, you have to step in. There's a lot of issues that we could address about that. I think, for women that are having a lot of babies every couple years or every year, and then postpartum depression and nutrition and exercise and all the difficulty of just getting through that phase of life, there should be a lot of support, and we just have to do what we can to try to make space. I think that what's hard is that a lot of men, they work hard, and then, when I come home, I don't want to work hard, or on the weekend, I don't want to work hard. And I just think that a Christian man isn't afforded that place. When you come home, there's work to do. Until the kids are in bed, there's dishes to be done, there's laundry to be done. I had the unfortunate blessing of my wife being very sick during her pregnancies for most of my children. And so there were phases in our family life where I just had to do it. She's in the hospital, I got a bunch of little kids, homeschool has to keep going, work has to keep going. It was a busy, crazy time, but it doesn't matter if you don't like doing dishes. It doesn't matter if you don't like doing laundry. It needs to be done. And I got that woman pregnant. I'm having these children year after year. I need to step in and make this work for her. And I think that's the other issue that I'll say about a wife that's in burnout. It's usually an indicator that that the load isn't dispersed well. I think that if we believe that men are leaders in the home, it should not fall to the people following in the home to bear more weight than the leader. And so it's an indication to me when my wife is burned out and not doing well and struggling to get through her days, I'm not carrying enough of her weight. And so I need to step in somewhere and somehow and figure out how I can help distribute that load so that she's not overwhelmed. And sometimes maybe that means making space for her to go out for an hour and have coffee on Saturday and just have some time to herself where she's not with half a dozen little kids, and she can actually think two consistent thoughts in her head and have some peace and quiet. Maybe she needs to go for a walk, maybe whatever, but find some way to get her the place and the peace that she needs so that she can continue to serve in the home the way that she's called to.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I was thinking that same thing. If my wife is overwhelmed with things in the home, and it falls on me ultimately for that, bearing with her in that. That's very, very good. I guess one of the things that I've been reflecting on, because we were having the same discussion on Wednesday, was we were talking about Sabbaths, but we were talking about, I was thinking about my wife, and I was like, look, I don't nurse babies. Babies are hanging off of her all day long. She's teaching homeschool all day long. She's there in the home with these children all day long. And I'm like, I get to go and come, and then like, what can I do as a husband to create some space for her, because they are with her all the time. There's even when they go to sleep, they're usually on top of her sleeping. So there is no break. Me making sure that I provide the things that my wife needs. So, Jamin, do you have anything to add to what Matthew was saying before I jump to a different question?
One other thing I was thinking about is just, I know my own tendency is to check out with both of these things in terms of discipline and in terms of like wife burnout. Like the temptation is to just, that's her problem. Like she's there. I think that's got to be like the worst thing that you can do. Even what you mentioned earlier, even if it's just like 10 minutes a day, like even if it's a short amount of time, like showing interest and not checking out, but staying focused, staying connected, staying present, with that. I think that's just the piece that I think of the most when I think of both of these issues.
That homeschooling needs to be a partnership task, that we together are schooling and educating the children. Our wives need some sense of support. I don't think they, at least my wife doesn't need me to step in and do 5 hours of instruction every day, but she needs to know that her problems are my problems and my problems are her problems.
That's good, because I was thinking, if we're one flesh, when my wife is hurting or something's going on, it's actually should be affecting me as well. And so remembering that is very good. I was going to jump to the last question just because I had an answer for that one. It says, how has serving as a homeschooling father deepened your Christian walk? I think it's kind of a dual phase. It's, as we talked about yesterday, I had to go back through kindergarten and first and second and all these grades again as we were teaching these subjects. So it's like I'm going back through school again. But homeschooling has, one, I now have people, I'm not the one asking the questions, everyone else is asking the questions of me. And if I'm going to teach my children biblically how I'm supposed to teach them, I need to make sure that I'm really squared away with the information I'm giving them, especially when it pertains to God's word. And so it really makes me dig much deeper and to open myself up more. And I have also been humbled enough to know many, many, many times that I do not have all the answers. And so then it has deepened my, even with discipline or anything else pertaining to schooling the children or helping them in the home growing, that my reliance upon the Lord for those things. And so homeschooling has helped me in all those aspects pertaining to my walk. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, the main things I think of just areas of character and like patience and long suffering, and it's going to be like raising children is the most difficult, like frustrating, testing thing that there is, and homeschooling just exacerbates that in the sense that they're like you're doing all that, they're with you a lot more, and so there's more opportunities for those things. So that's kind of like the sanctifying process of parenting. Is homeschooling goes right hand in hand with that, the sanctifying process, growing us in patience, long suffering.
I'd say that there's no better remedy for self than raising children. The stakes are very, very high. If you have any sensibility, you know that. And the demands are constant. And when I say remedy for self, I mean a bunch of things. I mean the discipline that's required to be responsible for their minds and their hearts, the worry about future outcomes, about their souls. Like these things become such constant drivers that you lose pieces of yourself time after time again. And I mean that also in the best possible ways, that the holistic care and love of their lives replaces so much self, in that it's one of the purest places, family in general, but especially your children, where you can really live putting others in front of yourself. And that, I just don't know, it's very hard to imagine a better therapy for selfishness than raising children and educating them especially. And I was a very selfish man when I started down this road, so.
Me too. I was thinking about something yesterday. We were talking about homeschooling and we were talking about discipling our children. And so I went ahead and I did the math on the requirements. I had briefly touched on Massachusetts because I'm new to Massachusetts, but it's 180 days a year that you must go to public school, and it's 900 hours per year. And so that's, what is it, 11,700 hours if you go from kindergarten to the 12th grade. And that's a whole lot of time to be exposed to other things. So you are taking the opportunity to spend those hours. That's the minimum. You obviously will spend more time because your commute and recess and all that stuff is not equated into those numbers. But yeah, it came out to be 6.41 years as a minimum that you spend, your children in public school spends learning from other people. So I applaud you.
Amen. That's good.
Any final questions? Josiah?
Sure. I can speak loud enough. I had questions. I have examples. In your own lives, how much do you draw on your own parenting example to be a parent, father, or in the negative, if you didn't have a father example?
Uh-huh.
How much of that affected how you ended up being a father or chose to be?
I think that, so my wife didn't have a father at all. And so I can see the marks of that in her life in two ways. I see the negative marks of that in her life in that her first experiences of seeing how a father interacts with a child are not her own childhood. It's her watching me interact with her children. And there's a whole kind of heartbreak in that experience to recognize you don't even recognize what you missed without a father until you see a father interacting with his children. And so ministering life in those hurts has been a big part of her healing in our marriage. I will also say that I very much believe that God is the father of the fatherless. And there are places in my wife's life, because she didn't have a father, where God has moved in really direct ways to minister to her and to bless her life because she didn't have that access to a father in the flesh. And so we've marked those things over the course of our lives together and thanked God for them when they come up. In my case, I had a very good father. He was very busy. He was a businessman. But there are a lot of things that he taught me that are very meaningful to me. My father's ability to point things out in the world and show me what they meant was a very important skill that he passed on to me. They raised me in the evangelical church where there was a real love of the scriptures as the word of God. And those things were really important aspects that my own father put into my life that I've tried to communicate to my children too, and I'm very grateful for. What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. My father is very harsh and very critical, and so I battle to not be that to my children. So there's a lot of things that I have tried to do differently, I think, when it comes to my father. My father also, when I was very young, removed himself from the church. So I'm trying to integrate my children back into that mindset. So teaching about God in my house was not anything that happened. My mother tried, but I kind of just rebelled against that. So, yeah, I also think about the things that my father taught me, and I come up kind of lacking. He kind of just pushed me towards going to school and academics. I was actually the first one in my family to go to college. So that was a pretty big thing for my father, for that to happen. So, but yeah, I think I don't know, I feel like my slate was a little bit kind of blank when it came to my children. And so I'm trying to look at what I would like, looking at other families and looking at other fathers and how they're doing things, and kind of picking from them and saying, that's kind of what I would like to do. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I can see in myself sometimes some of the things that I don't want to see and some of those things. So I have to really work on those things and keep those things in check, because my father was very critical. I can be super critical myself, or I can place that bar really, really high. I also learned a lesson. I can't really expect my children to obtain a bar that I haven't really taught them how to do something. Like, that expectation has to be able to be taught before you can expect them to do those things. And so that was a hard lesson learned for me, because I would just be like, look, you're here, so you should be able to do this now. But I was not doing a good job teaching so that they could do those things. So remembering that things have to be taught first, and you can't expect perfection if you're not going to teach how to do those things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can conclude that. I had a very different experience than that. My father is a fantastic dad, and I feel like if I could just like attain to what he did, I would be all set. And so I think just that variety of experiences even shows us it's important to like respect and appreciate our fathers for the good. You know, even there's always bad mixed in with the good, but appreciate the things that we can, but learn and grow. We want every generation to launch further than the previous.
Follow up to that is my personal experience. And I want to say to my family, I come from a family where my mom was a spiritual leader in the home. My dad, like I said, my basically why I think people being good parents to your kids who are there to ask questions and ask questions of you. It helps you along in your journey to understand. So I had two parents who really do those things, one more so than the other. My mom used her negative examples to teach the things and not because they're a problem creating a wrong person. My dad was a theological heavy individual, so when it came to understanding the value of scripture and the things that Jesus, he could expound on. He did not expound on these things directly. Anyways, so I saw a person who was very intellectually savvy, who knew a lot, but didn't necessarily practice. And I find myself in that person. So I can, I'm intelligent, I'm able to pass on information, but I find myself struggling with how do I function as a spiritual leader in the home. And I have, for example, that I find myself falling into the same trap of being intellectually capable but practical. So nothing happened, but just what do I do?
Yeah.
So how do I, kind of ask a little bit more spiritual, how do I spiritually lead in the home? I've gotten very individualistic on or lacking desire. So how do I just maintain that?
I think that um, Christian thought in America is losing some of its moorings. It's losing some of its ancient values. Not in all senses. I think Trinitarianism is very secure. I think these, some rooted ideas about salvation and who God is are pretty well entrenched. But how to live the faith is becoming less and less moored in Western Christianity to ancient ways of thinking about these things. I think that regardless of where someone finds themselves in their faith community, my encouragement, especially to young men, is to develop some system of personal accountability. Whatever church you're in, if you can find a few people who will pray with you and walk with you and meet with you and talk about things, it's actually not very hard to do discipleship. You only need a few people, and you don't even need a leader. You just need a few guys who are like, we're going to do this. A few guys who will sit down week after week and say, hey, let's make a space in our schedule where we're going to talk about the things that matter in our lives. And the best way to grow any issue, whether it's whatever the issue is, the best way to grow is to recognize it and to commit to change and find some paths to start moving forward. And if you can do that in the context of a couple people, where you can sit down and say, here's what I'm working on, here's what I want to do over the next week or weeks, and I want you to ask me about it. That is a path to growth. And maybe that's health issues, maybe it's spiritual issues, maybe it's business issues, whatever you need to grow in, gaining some accountability and some people who will walk with you in that is the path forward. There's maybe ways to do it without that, but that's the best way to do it. And it really is a pretty minimal set of requirements that you just need a few people who will walk with you. And if you can find that within your faith community, you can excel in almost any environment. You have enough insight, you personally have enough insight about this issue, you know what needs to grow. And so plotting those things and saying, I want to be better at living out spiritual leadership in my home. And so that's the beginning of the battle. And then you just have to start thinking about practically, what does that mean? How am I praying with my family? How am I teaching them the scriptures? How am I talking and thinking about character? How am I modeling character? Like, these are the paths that you want to start putting together in some kind of accountability with some men around you and praying about those things together. And that's dynamite, man. You can be a different person, a different father in a year. All right.
So thanks for this. We'll have a short break. And,